idea that China is going to end up like a Western-style society is a nonsense. China will remain China. China was the home of statecraft. China was more advanced than any other countries in the nearby. Confucian values became very influential. I mean, we talk about the Sinic countries, Korea, Vietnam, also Japan, based their principles of organization also on Confucian values. I mean, originally, you know, the first moment, as it were, of unification in 211 BC with the Qin Empire, it was quite a small part of China, and then it grew subsequently quite a lot during the Han dynasty. And basically, the way it grew was by a process, sometimes of war, sometimes of more simple, as it were, persuasion, of a mutuality of interest. But the general Confucian approach was a sort of persuasive, inclusive, I suppose, based on the idea of, you know, good morals, good governance, honest governance, and so on. And this grew into a very powerful model, actually, across the continent for those who, over time, were interested in joining up with this enlarging China. So it was a complicated process. There were lots of different elements within it. I think the most important single element was good governance. Confucius's argument, you know, was that the emperor should model himself on the family, on the father, being patriarchal times. You know, a good emperor is like a good father in the family. There was a very strong kind of moral streak, if you like, or moral dimension to the Confucian values. I mean, I think you can still see the connection over time. I mean, obviously things have changed hugely and are changing even quicker than ever before. But I think what you see in China, I think, is still a profound respect for government. And this has been very important because China's a very unusual society in that the state is embedded in that society and has a very kind of intimate relationship with society in a manner that is, say, quite different from Western societies. So there's a kind, in some senses, you know, in some ways, China is synonymous with the state. I don't mean that they are completely the same, but you know, you'd never talk in those terms about the United States or Britain, because government is kept at arm's length. Government is much weaker. Government is a lot less listened to. But in China, that is not true. Even today, it is definitely not true. You know, our traditions in the West are very important to us, but Chinese traditions are very important. People have grown up thinking of the state in a certain kind of way, with a certain sense of expectation, a certain sense that it can deliver, a certain belief that the state should be competent and state officials should be able to do things. In other words, that it's a meritocratic system of organisation which promotes those who are capable of doing the job. That's completely different from the West. I think that this is certainly an almost universally held position in the West, that the only really legitimate way that government can be constituted is based on on universal suffrage and a multi-party system. But I don't think that's the only way of organising your governance, and nor is it necessarily the most effective way. I mean, China is a completely different proposition. It's huge. It's 1.4 million people. It's the size of a continent. So, you know, how does that work? I think if China were consisted of a bunch of competing political parties, probably Chinese unity would be undermined and China would divide. I think that is quite likely in a situation like that. Because I think that it's likely that the common interest would fragment into the many interest groups that exist in a country of this scale. I mean, you know, if you compare Britain or the United States with China, I would say that the state is far more competent than the one we have in Britain or the one we have in America. And it's displayed this actually in this period. by the extraordinary capacity with which it's taken the country out of poverty, the most remarkable economic transformation in human history. Now, you need a lot of very competent people and competent institutions, dynamic institutions, to be able to do that. So the Chinese presume or expect that. That doesn't mean it's always true. Of course, in Chinese history, there have been periods when that hasn't been true. But the Chinese expect that of their state. So they look at it in a different way. Whereas in Britain, we don't think of it quite like that. Because we're always trying to push the state away. Because we're always thinking, we don't want too much government. But I don't think that. I think in China, you need actually, with a country of this scale, you actually need a lot of government.